Fabrizio to share more. So now you know this is being recorded. And I will kick us off, just mindful of people's time. I see your note, Michelle, that you'll have to drop off. We understand there's lots of pressure on people's time from different directions. And these days I like to say real life trumps Zoom. So if you have real life things to do that aren't in the airwaves, then of course we also completely understand that. So I'll just organically welcome people as you come on. I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see super well who else here, but I see that Farmer Heather, as she's known lovingly in my family, has just arrived. Great to see you, Heather, and lots of other familiar and new faces. Feel free to adjust your name on the Zoom to show where you are in the world. I failed to do that in advance. I'm coming to you live from Montreal, Canada. I'll say a few brief introductory words, and then I'll ask Fabrizio to say more about who it is we see on screen and what we're here to talk about today. Very briefly, I'd like to give some context about this speaker series that you're participating in, and share a quick bit about why I think it matters, and then hand over to Fabrizio. And I will invite you all to think about some questions and ideas, because this will be very much a listening experience for me in a few moments, and hopefully for all of us on the line to hear what you are thinking and seeing and questioning and learning. The reason behind this speaker series, and this one is the second in a series of what I hope will be three, and still conjuring up the third one, was to explore what it will mean to decolonize regenerative agriculture. And that's a lot of jargon, and I'm going to unpick it a little bit in this minute. I have noticed over the last couple of years great enthusiasm and interest around the concepts and principles and application of what's being called regenerative agriculture, which can mean a lot of different things, but it definitely doesn't mean monoculture, industrial, degenerative relationship with the soil for food, fiber, fuel production, all the things we do when we grow things. But what's the concern around colonization or decolonization and regenerative agriculture? One of the things I noticed, and I very much noticed it in myself, and then saw it sort of happening around us, is this great bandwagon of people jumping in going, this is amazing, we can sequester carbon, we can have wonderful, beautiful local food and see incredible things. And in that rush to do something amazing, we forgot a few really important basic things. Like, a lot of people around the world have been practicing what we might call regenerative agriculture for millennia. And they've been some of the most marginalized, oppressed, and excluded communities in our industrial modern culture. And so to get really excited and jump on a bandwagon about something new runs the risk of missing some very beautiful, long extant traditions from which we can learn. And maybe a little bit darker than that, there's a real risk of further marginalizing and further excluding some of the very people whom we should be learning from and listening to the most. And that's essentially what colonization does, is it in a very linear, sometimes very excited, well-meaning fashion, and often having very negative impacts, excludes those voices who have the greatest potential to bring us connection, community, health, and the sort of wellness that I think many of us seek in the regenerative movement, if you will. And so noticing that in myself, getting very excited about soil, soil health and regenerative farming, and then going a little deeper into it over the last few years and realizing I was contributing to that problem of colonization, being a white settler, being raised in a linear, mechanistic, analytical mindset, and trying to unlearn and relearn some of the ways that may be more beneficial, I came to know some differences, some alternatives to that approach. And that led me to want to invite more voices into the regenerative agriculture space. You may have had a chance to watch the videos of the first in this series, which was with a farmer named Valerie Gabriel. She wanted to be with us here today, and she may pop in from the field, but they're harvesting corn today in Ganasatake. So she wasn't able to join, but I'll drop links into the chat to make sure that you have access to her videos. I'll do that once I stop sharing my screen with these photos, which you'll learn a bit more about. And this is the second, where we had Fabrizio, whom you're about to meet, and I had the great pleasure of having a lengthy, very rich conversation with Adan Toninho, whom you see in this photo and you'll learn more about. that original conversation was in Portuguese. And I'll drop the link in case you missed it. We lovingly layered in English subtitles because we felt it is such a rich conversation and it took a lot of nuance and detail. What the Google Translate does with that kind of conversation is miss a lot of the very important information really that they were sharing with us. So there is a subtitled in English version of that conversation. And if you haven't had a chance to have a look, I strongly recommend you do. It is a truly rich, beautiful conversation. For those of you who have seen it, or for those who are just here to think and listen and learn and share what you know about the possibilities of decolonizing regenerative agriculture, I will now offer a reflection and a question. And I encourage you to go where you like with these as we go into the discussion. And from there, I'll hand over to Fabricio, who will share some more direct reflections as the person who introduced us to Adan Toninho, who knows them personally, and who can share more details. So my reflection is that through my conversation, through the conversation we had with Adan Toninho and spending really extensive time doing that translation, so really steeping in the conversation, I was really encouraged and touched by how they handle in present tense, the level of prejudice and exclusion that they experience both socially and economically. I heard responses that were so full of love and openness and curiosity. I did not hear malice. I did not hear anger. I didn't even hear frustration. I heard capacity to adapt and learn and share across generations. And that observation, I get goosebumps even as I describe it now, it really filled me with a sense of awe. And it reminded me that perhaps that is what regenerative agriculture and regeneration more broadly is at a time when I think we could really use that. And so the question I'll put to you to perhaps hold throughout this conversation and for when you go into the video, if you haven't yet, or if you go back in after this, the question I would ask you is what surprised you? What learning came forward for you in thinking about the concept, the idea, the opportunity to decolonize regenerative agriculture? So that's my observation, my question or invitation to you. With that, I will ask Fabricio to take the microphone. I will put myself on mute. I'll be toggling through some photographs as Fabricio is talking, and then we'll end on a map to show you where we are in the world, as in where these folks are in the world. And then we'll open it up to dialogue. We are recording. We welcome discussion, both in the chat, but also very much live. So we'll be getting you to come off mute, and I'll help to facilitate that. With that, I'll zip it and hand it over to you, Fa.
Thank you, Lorraine. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation in the very beginning. It was amazing to see Val's interview in the first place, and I really thought it was amazing as we started talking about this decolonial talks. And the thing that I would like to start with is how it happened that I got in touch with these people in the first place, which is I used to work in a place that resells what we are now calling regenerative food, but it's actually it was mainly organic and all the types of agroecological production that we have here in Brazil. And from this place, I got in touch with ISA, which is one of the biggest supporting institutions we have here in Brazil for at least two types of original population, I mean, indigenous people and quilombolas. And through ISA, I managed to meet Fred, who's in here with us, luckily. And that started in my mind the idea that I had to visit this area where ISA was working for more than almost 2 decades, I think. And I decided to have a bike trip there in Vale do Ribeira. So I started in Eldorado. We're probably going to see this area after. And in the cooperative, talking about business too, not business as usual, but business too, I managed to meet the father of Adan Toninho, who's in the interview, and he was very welcoming. I told that I was going to pass by their place in the following day. They said, no, you should enter and be there with us and so on. So I was hosted by this family at once, and then I visited with the whole crew of Feira Livre for my group by the time, to get to know the production. And even for us, we were working with farmers, and it was very, very new. It was amazing to get to know their production, because not only it's agroecological, but it's also a drive to maintain population that was in there and left. You could see by the interviews that they were not living in the area anymore, and they came back after all the struggles, and for sure the Constitution of 1988 and some other steps forward. And now they are like very, very exemplary producers, as you can see in some of the pictures. Not only because they are regenerating and kind of not a dead area, but a very poor soil after a long time of bull and cows production. That's in the other side of the river. When we were talking, we were having a conversation, and I mentioned one area in the other side of the river. So as you can see in some of the pictures, they are crossing this river, and in the other side it was very dry. I mean, it was mainly basically area for bulls and cows production. And they mentioned that there was a water spring in there that they are trying to recover, because as there is no original what is it called, original forests, we don't have the water that was generated by this forest. So this work is pretty day-to-day life. They produce, but at the same time they keep the place, and they are very, very close to one of the biggest areas that are conserved in tropical forests here in the state of São Paulo. As far as I remember, we only have from 4 to 6% of the remaining tropical forests in here, and they are in the area that is most conserved, and they are doing a work that is right together with the forest somehow, because the forest is all around, and they just keep a production that they themselves mention it's not much more than what we need, but what comes of an accident, what is more than what we need, we have an organization that gets all this food and resell it. Firstly, as far as I remember, Fred can correct me by the chat right now or after. Firstly, for government, so they were selling to public programs in here for buying from local farmers. That they name it as PAA and PNAE, which are two main policies that took place in a much stronger fashion a couple of years ago, and not that much right now. And as I was going there, they were at that very moment starting the conversation of opening way for selling to other areas. So they decided to sell to the place where I used to work, Instituto Feira Livre, but also to some other places. And they had a very strong role now in the pandemic time, sharing, distributing food here in vulnerable areas. There is a video, which if Lorraine, if you by any chance can have the possibility to link it, I mean, it's going to be in the bottom part of the video as the description comes, but there is this video that shows part of their production and how they shared this production to vulnerable people here in the center of São Paulo. So this image is from the storage area in the cooperative. We're talking about more than 200 people organized in there. And they play a very important role because as you have heard in the interview, there is a great bunch of racism going on in the area. So they don't sell locally. They don't sell to the supermarkets clothes. And that also connects to the food system in Brazil, which is very centralized, and somehow most of the supermarkets, they buy from food distribution centers, which are very oligopolized or monopolized, we could say. And so pretty much they don't, I mean, you've heard how the production is. I mean, they conserve, they have their traditional way of producing, and they do agroecological production. They respect the time of the nature. So for sure, I mentioned in the interview, that's the type of production that should have open space everywhere to be sold. And for sure, sometimes even be a little bit more expensive because they take more time or they take more effort. But actually, that's not what happens. You know, they don't access local markets apart from this policy that I mentioned before. But this policy by itself has its band. I don't know how to call it, Lorraine, but the budget is being going down in the latest years. And for sure, they had to search for other places, and they only found the type of recognition in much bigger cities like in Sao Paulo, where you can talk about the not only the regenerative agenda, but here in Brazil, especially agroecological agenda, and especially the rise of awareness from the population related to what is a healthy food relationship. Because what we are noticing is that Brazil is being more and more known for the fact that we allow pretty much every type of pesticide in here, especially after the beginning of this government. It was even easier. You wanna talk about this map that you're showing, Lorraine?
No, you're going to talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
You're just going to quickly center us where we are in the world. I'm going to zoom out. You can tell we rehearsed this extensively.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to bring us home so people know where we are and guide. So just on the geography, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So here, more in the south of like in the image, you see the very end of the city of El Dorado, and all the way up river, it's where these communities are. And that's exactly the area closer to one of some of our natural parks. And so you see all this great green area is what we have conserved as at best from our tropical forests here in the state of São Paulo. I myself, my family comes from the northeast of the state, and it's way drier than this area. So as you can see now, we are in a tiny greener area of the country and the planet, and they play this very important role of keeping it as it is. So that's why we want this conversation to happen, because sometimes when I look, for instance, to a documentary such as Solo Fértil in Portuguese is Kiss the Ground, right, in English?
Kiss the ground. Yeah.
So Kiss the Ground is amazing show. My parents or anyone who has never really talked about regenerative soil practices and so on. But it's funny too to see that like some of the greatest experiences are not being recognized at all. And I'm not talking about only a fashion or mainstream, or I'm talking about myself. I mean, if I didn't go there myself and notice what was going on in this type of production, I would probably never have known about these practices and about this history of reoccupation and so on. And that is something that we have to notice, because even listening to these people demands a different time. As you have probably noticed in the interview, They have a beautiful way of telling the stories, connecting dots, connecting what was before them, what is the work of their ancestors, what is the work of nature itself, because they keep some seeds inside for decades, and then the seeds come back. So there might, for them, it makes sense that there is something connected to this organization, and that's the type of listening that we have to practice somehow. I mean, I watched a couple of weeks ago a nice conversation between Ernest Koch, Elaine Ingham, and I think Zach Weiss was the Soil Foundation from Elaine that organized. It was so amazing to listen to them. I mean, they know a lot about soil, a lot, and even in that we had like, I think, 2 hours or something like that. It was not even just the beginning of what they had to offer. And for sure, we are talking about people who are well recognized everywhere in the world, or they should, at least in terms of soil health and so on. But the fact that there is such conversations don't actually open way for the small work. I mean, these 200 families connected to Koperki Valley, they are pretty much like Toninho and Adam, and they make the greatest work that I know in here. So when Lorraine asked for, maybe there is someone that you could show the stories, and I started to think of pretty much the same people that are everywhere, but I'm quite sure that we should look at these small practices and how they are already feeding themselves and feeding some other people with their production, and how it is not about how they scale their production. For sure, there is this aim to, but it's how we learn with them what they are doing, how we listen to them in a better way than we have been doing so far, and how do we translate to more people, as we're doing here, what is this work, why it should be recognized, and so and well, I really don't feel like keeping the voice for too long, because some of you probably have watched it, and you might have some questions, or you might have some comments, and that would be amazing to listen. And I pass the word back to Lorraine, but any time, I think, or any moment, if you wanna talk, I'm not sure if there is this waving thing. Of, you tell that, Lorraine. You know the
yeah,
game.
I can help here for sure. First of all, thank you so much, Fabricio. Your connection, your knowledge, your relationship, both with Adan Toninho and with the local food system more broadly in the Sao Paulo area, is just amazing. I would encourage anybody who doesn't already know Fabricio to private message him and say, can we talk more later? Because he is an incredible resource of awareness and knowledge about this journey that I think we're all on. But now I think we go into the unscripted zone where really we want to listen to you. So both Fabricio and I are just going to be quiet. This is time for your questions and or observations. And I don't have a formal way to do this. I'm going to suggest you take yourself off mute and just weigh in, and we'll just be quiet until somebody wants to check in with anything that's coming up.
I can start with just a short observation and just some gratitude also, just to echo that. I did get to watch the conversation last night, and it's yeah, so many things, so many questions, so many parallels. So I'm in Canada and then far in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's just interesting to see how there are parallel pressures and tensions in the farming communities here with what's happening there. And so I guess one of the questions that came to me as this perspective on decolonizing regenerative agriculture is sort of a parallel question or a related question about decolonizing the way the food moves, or there's the practice of the growing, and then there's what happens next. And so to me, I had lots of questions. I have similar experiences to potentially some of what they were experiencing, but also questions around what are the possibilities for shifting that? Yeah, I think that's, I'll just leave that for now and let other folks speak.
Thanks, Heather. I'm actually going to put you on the spot a tiny bit and just ask, would you mind sharing a little bit more about what those limits or constraints look and feel like to you? Because I have a feeling, just for example, I can bridge a little knowing some of what's gone on. And there's a link I'm going to try to get into the chat that Fabricio mentioned about Adan Toninho's community, that when the pandemic hit, so along with all the barriers they're already facing, which are large, when the pandemic hit, both their market dropped out and they didn't have a place to sell, and there were vulnerable communities, what we would describe as slums or people living in favelas, because we lack the appropriate language to speak to people with dignity. They took it upon themselves to provide food baskets to share with vulnerable communities. So the layers of vulnerability are just staggering for somebody sitting in Montreal, Canada to fathom. And that's just what they did. There's a really beautiful video about it. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble multitasking, so I'm gonna get it in there. So I'm wondering if you could offer a bit more commentary about your experience of the challenges of distributing food, because I know they're different. They're not to say they're easier in any way, shape, or form, but the kinds of vulnerabilities or market challenges are quite different. And I think it'd be helpful to hear your experience.
Sure, I can say a bit. So one, as a farmer, so my partner and I are growing grains organically and working directly with customers and consumers and eaters on an individual level on a small scale, but then, and really ideally would like to have everything that we're growing work that way, move directly through a web of interpersonal connections from community to community, so that it's building that strength and generativity in those relationships. But because right now there isn't the interest or the awareness to be able to work on a scale in that way, we're also working with larger bulk purchasers who don't have a loyalty necessarily to where they're purchasing. They're going with whatever is cheapest and whatever makes sense for them at the time. And so there's an insecurity there as to whether there's a place for the food to go that we're growing when we work on a larger scale. So I have questions about the scale that they were speaking about, working and producing food for themselves. And this we would call subsistence farming. And that makes so much sense, because then they're not depending on these larger buyers the way they were before, right? There's pros and cons, I think, to the levels of scale that can be worked on. And so when they were speaking about when they did work with the collective, the primary customer being the government programs, on the one hand, that feels encouraging that the government is supporting those types of purchases. I don't know what happened during the pandemic and why that dropped out. Like in Canada, there actually ended up being some more purchasing that happened because of the pandemic from government programs. So I have questions around that sort of whole dynamic. But the sense of that there was a reliance on that one market of the government programs. And then when it stopped, there's a big hole there. And so the benefits of having multiple directions for things to be going all the time and multiple relationships and ways that the food can be moving, to me feels like the ideal, or the regenerative approach would include lots of small possibilities interconnecting with each other. And so that's I guess that's the vision that I would see makes sense to move towards, and that how that works in terms of scale. And you said it's not that they want to scale up, right? That's not the point. And so maybe in the Northern Hemisphere, maybe it's more descaling. So yeah, those are just some of the questions. And I also work with school food programs, and so I'm interested in the ways that things were happening in Brazil, I think it sounds like, and that there was a focus on healthy food going into schools and being available to everyone, which I think is actually more progressive than what's happening in Canada. So yeah, lots of different layers of things there. Thanks.
Well, I think I might try to react, Lorraine, and thank you so much, Heather, for the guidance, because there are some things which we don't put that much attention when making the first presentation, and conversation flows exactly with such good questions. And first of all, in relation to the program that started as a possibility for them to sell, I'm in a very risky zone in here, especially because Fred has been following these people for a long time, and please correct me as you see, but this program, these two programs, PAA and PNI, they're both very important programs in here because they focused on taking away the middleman, which means the federal government buys the food, but locally the schools receive the food from producers which are close by. So that changes a lot of the main roles that were being played in here, because there was a middleman, the one who had access to the state, and the middleman was the one who was going to get more money out of this production. So now you can buy directly from producers, but that is a great complexity that has to be made more easily, because the land owning in Brazil is such a great problem, and especially if you are quilombolas as they are. And also you have to have some documentation to sell to the government, and not all farmers have access to internet, electrical systems, and all of, I mean, that's not different from all the other parts in the world. And for sure, you have to organize yourself, because you alone, going in a relationship to the state is complex. So that's why there is a great cooperative there into. In the very beginning of the budgets were going down because, not only these federal government right now, not only they lower the budget, but they are in a way against this production. Bolsonaro, right before entering, he mentioned quilombolas in the most racist possibility, and we knew from the very beginning that they were going to be chased, or they are not going to have any policies that should be happening right now. In the beginning of the pandemic, some of the places that were going to get the food, like schools, they closed. So state buy to all the facilities that are from the state. So some of them closed. So there was no possibility to deliver the food and so on. Some schools have opened only to deliver the food, but I'm not sure if that happened specifically there in Vale do Ribeira. And the other thing is, they were already selling to other areas. I know about Instituto Feira Livre in São Paulo and some other initiatives, but also these places that have probably been affected by the COVID situation, you know, and budget was going down before the pandemic. So all these contexts, they generate a situation in which we are still facing here in Brazil, like 90 million people now are at risk of hunger or starvation and so on. So all of that pressures them to make this very incredible work of, you know, delivering the food production someplace else. I mean, in the news here in Brazil, we had lots of news about the producers that were taking their tractors, I don't know how to call it, like their machines to destroy the production, and that doesn't make any sense. It is because supposedly they didn't have a place to sell, but they definitely had a place to donate. So that was a big discussion we had in here, because they, like the good producers, they were connected to what was going on, and they really did their job, even not getting a penny sometimes. And that's because they understand a broader view of what is their role in this situation. And apart from that, you were talking about how the food moves, and that really is something we have to rethink totally, because I mean, the possibility opened for them to sell was in a place 4.5 hours of distance from El Dorado. I mean, I used to love to have their food with me, but I was not supposed to be their public. They had to sell it closer. Doesn't make sense. But the food, the chain of supermarkets in there comes from a way further distance, and we are talking about a country that produces a lot of food, but at the same time, it can be from super far away distance, and they themselves had to go to São Paulo. I mean, it's the same state, but we are 4.5 hours of distance. So that doesn't make any sense, because, you know, what structure generates that? I mean, big chains of supermarkets with very stuck systems of sourcing. Even when you buy, I mean, even if this big chain of supermarkets were going to buy from them, in the end of the day, they are going to, you know, spread their everything they get to shareholders or to their original owners in other countries, which makes no sense too. So everything after their production is a big problem, actually, you know, because normally they will have access to very few and small initiatives like the one I was working on, and not, for instance, they had to do their own fair. As far as I remember, Fred can correct me too, but they didn't have access to the fair, like the regular fair, like street fair. They had to do their own fair inside the storage area, because they had to open way for reselling by themselves in the very beginning. I mean, we are talking about a very, very institutional racism in this case. And I'm talking about private issues, because in the state, they also face racism. I mean, the way they produce face lots of resistance in the state, because sometimes they know that they can make a new growing area, and they can, in the practice, burn this small growing area and grow in there. But they know that they are going to leave this area to rest for a long time after they produce. So the cycle comes back. And this type of situation is faced with a lot of racism inside the state. So I'm just mentioning all this context because actually it's not in the video, but what happens with the food after they produced. It's a whole rocky path, because somehow it should be everywhere, or it should be closer to them in order to make more sense to the world, not to ourselves. I mean, as I told, I had this great difficulty to translate to people that avocado that was coming from them was hugely different from any avocado you get in the supermarkets. So, but you know, they were avocados. You couldn't see any difference if you didn't make a chemical analysis of pesticides and so on. It was the same avocado. So how do we translate this is also another regenerative agenda. You know, that's what I've been working on. But the thing is, there is, I could mention lots of rocks in this rocky path more, but it's the first thing that occurs to me by your question.
Thanks, Fa. Clearly, you've touched a nerve, Heather. It's connected to so many things. Thank you for the question. And I noticed that Josie, who had posted her thoughts on the Kiss the Ground phenomenon and the challenge that comes with a movie like Kiss the Ground, I think she's had to drop off, but I wanted to draw people's attention to that comment in the chat. She noticed or shared, I wish that Kiss the Ground would work in community with you all rather than working in a way that is oblivious to these communities. I just wanted to signal that it's my understanding that Kiss the Ground has gone through a bit of an awakening in the response to some of the criticisms that have been put towards them. And they are, I'm not here to speak on their behalf, but it's my understanding that they are trying to adopt some of this awareness and understanding and forge new and different connections. Having said that, I did want to open up the room wider and say, do others have questions, observations, things connected to the decolonizing of regenerative ag, intergenerational, learning from the seeds, learning from the land. And I would encourage you to take yourselves both off mute and to put your camera on if you wouldn't mind, just to humanize the room and let us know who's checking in. Any questions, wave a hand, take yourself off mute, or observations at all. Please, Carrie.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this conversation, Lorraine and Fabricio. This is so fascinating. So I guess I just would like to raise the question of, or bring into the room the question of decolonizing financing for regenerative agriculture at the appropriate scale. So as Lorraine knows well, thanks to the community of GRC, I've been we've been preparing for months to launch an initiative called the Global Regenerative Finance Initiative, otherwise known as REFI. And the intention there is to redesign the tools of finance to be able to support, you know, this appropriate way of working with the land. And as we've already acknowledged here, there is an inherent impulse in the way finance and investors currently view agriculture, which is, you know, to scale, to commodify, right? And to, you know, to externalize, right? So one of the questions we've been contemplating very deeply in our conversations is how do we get resources, financial resources? And by the way, I want to just say very clearly that my presumption is not that these people need money. I mean, I think most farmers do need access to some sort of resources. But capital may not be, you know, financial capital may not be the right answer. So I'm open, but certainly I can speak, having observed many people in the GRC community, many of whom are doing projects at a scale that is appropriate, who are very much in need of basic financial resources to extend their work, to grow their work, not necessarily to scale their work. And so the question is, how do we formulate a pool of resources that meets the real genuine needs of such smaller agroforestry propositions around the globe? And I know Seeds, for example, is doing some of this And you know, there are examples, but it'd be great to. I mean, I'm not necessarily inviting conversation, but that's a question we're contemplating. And if any of you have thoughts, I'll put my chat in my email in the chat.
Thanks, Carrie. That's great. And it would be great if you put your link there for people who want to explore that. I'm all over the regenerative finance question with no answers. Would anybody like to respond directly to what Carrie's probing at, or weigh in with your own new thread, comments, questions? It's very open space, and both Fabrizio and I had said we want to do as much listening as possible. So going to stay quiet here. I see a hand, but then you just disappeared. Where'd you go? Oh, there. Natalie, please unmute yourself, and love to hear from you. Thank you. And thanks, Carrie. Really appreciate the comments and questions.
Unmute. Do I have to put my hand down as well?
I might be able to do that if I practice my tech savvy, so just go for it.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm Natalie. I'm in Bali at the moment, and I'm working with a group, Regenerative Agriculture group. It's called Astum Caraway. They have the Astum Caraway Trail, which is a trail for pilgrims going from Canggu across, like basically across Bali. And I first connected with them a few months ago. I've been learning about bamboo, and my background is from living with families in the Philippines with my daughter who's special needs, and yeah, having support from them, and then just seeing like, shit, you know, this whole bamboo thing is like, it's not accessible. It's kind of a bit like the agriculture thing. We need some sort of finance to be able to, for them to afford to make bamboo sustainable. That's a whole nother story, but basically the ideas that I've been having is around like how to combine like sustainable, I'd hate the word sustainable, but you know, like a sustainable tourism, or like connecting the Eastern and Western cultures, because especially with Indigenous people and those kind of groups that really need the finance, like have less access to it, to traditional finance models. And not that we want those kind of models really to continue, but I'm looking at running like courses and for people like more Westerners to learn about bamboo, but I also have like a local outreach program to help local knowledge on making bamboo a sustainable building material and resource that local people can actually access, because yeah, most people here are also, I think in most Asian countries, I haven't been to South America, but would love to go someday, you know, working on like $10 a day kind of salaries and stuff. So, you know, it's just it's a different world, like, and I've, yeah, sort of lived in Philippines and, you know, lived here with local families. So I'm, yeah, trying to connect together. Like, I'm just about to start working on a crowdfunding so that people can, because I think like I'd love to watch. I've just been copying all the links, like, oh, I want to watch that, of because yeah, there is this sort of like risk factor of like, there's some people coming in to do a model school, and yeah, like my experience of the green school, I don't mean to like smear anyone's name or anything, but it's like, it's really just for the rich, you know, it's kind of like sustainability for the 1%. So it's like, come on guys, like we've got to be doing something at like a local level where it's actually not just trash for class and, you know, giving people some rice for picking up some plastic. Like there's got to be more fundamental like shift and, you know, perspectives around it. And yeah, my feeling like is that, you know, as things get worse and worse in Western countries, like Australia is at present, I'm originally from Australia, is going to absolute shit. And in terms of the cost of food, so much stuff is, you know, the politics and everything. Like, I think what I see is like for Westerners and, you know, with the privileged backgrounds to use like the money that we have to really like make a jump or a leap of faith and really actually learn hands-on, not just like a PDC course and grow some cherries on your back veranda, like, but actually real farming, which is like, there's one really good, a few good projects popping up here, and like, because, you know, the Balinese, Indonesians, like all these people in the less privileged countries, they still have these skills. They can actually get out there and farm. They fricking do the work. Whereas we just sort of sit there and go, oh yeah, let's pick another cherry tomato. And it's not serious food production. Whereas, you know, it needs to be like this market gardening approach, like the diversification. And, you know, I'm sure we've all read those like sustainability reports and everything. So I'm trying to basically put together these courses where people can put down like a pre-investment amount of money. So like a third of the cost for my courses will go towards, like, I'm just calling it at the moment, like the bamboo bank. So it's like that money will be available for local farmers to borrow and, or, you know, to get infrastructure loans, like, and that's one of the model that one of the farms starting here worked on with a local restaurant and like a resort up in Ubud. And okay, like there's in, say, Sao Paulo, I don't know how many restaurants and resorts would be, you know, it's like same in Philippines, you know, they're not sort of all over the place, but Bali's very small and quite close together. So the concept behind it was the infrastructure loan to this farm, this family, to convert, the conversion process, which, you know, takes like 6 months kind of thing. And so that enabled them to, you know, buy the wood chips, like, you know, get all the materials, which, you know, only $5,000, 5,000 American dollars. And that enabled them to like do this whole conversion. Now they've got this amazing farm in full production. And the terms was that the restaurant resort got first option on buying the produce. That was it. Like, but because it's one of the first farms, my concerns were like, well, how do you set the price? You know, because there's no other regen ag farm like there. And I see a lot of that sort of greenwashing stuff of like, there's organic farmers and things going on, but it's still the middleman doing the distribution side that, you know, gets the biggest profit. So yeah, I mean, I've still got a lot of questions around it. By no means have figured it all out, but I just have like the perspective of like, maybe through being able to, whether it's courses or experience, you know, like this, like the trail, the Aston Caraway Trail, like I'll put the link in there. The website's awesome. And it is a great concept, and they do charge like, you know, the higher price. They are really working towards helping local rice farmers convert to non-chemical production. And yeah, the fertilizers are hugely subsidized here in Indonesia. So yeah, it's kind of inspirational in that way, that we can actually utilize like tourism dollars instead of like people going and staying in a big hotel, that they might actually like to, you know, live alongside Indigenous people, like, or home, like local people. My aim is to, like, through the courses, like each course build a homestay for a local family. So then that gives that local family a potential income for other Westerners or people that might want to come and stay there. And that's sort of, you know, why go and work in the city when you can like basically cook, live your life and all that. So yeah, I'm very good at going off on tangents.
No, I really appreciate your commentary, Natalie. It's really helpful to hear what you're doing. I'm partly signaling just because we're coming to the top of the hour, and I know there are some people who are going to need to drop off. So I just wanted to say we're going to keep the line open for another 30 minutes, which was the scheduled time. And I also really want to, as much as we can, Arlene, I see your hand up there. I do want to come to you, but I wanted to make sure, since we have a kind of unusual opportunity with a number of folks from Latin America, and because this original interview was with colleagues and friends in Sao Paulo, I wanted to make sure we heard those voices as well. So, but really, really appreciate your comments, Natalie. Very interesting. And you can see when you have a moment to catch up in the chat, lots of interest and excitement around the bamboo bank. So keep us posted and share anything that's public that people can follow up with.
All right.
But I did want to invite Frederico, if you would like to offer any comments on what you've heard, questions that are coming up. Se é mais fácil em português, pode falar em português, vou traduzir. I can do a live translation if that's helpful, whatever, o que seria mais fácil. So we'll take Fred's comment and then Arlene, we'll make sure we get to you as well.
É mais fácil em português.
Tá, ótimo. It's easier for him in português. Então, corta frases, frases pequenas e eu vou traduzir rapidinho.
Eu sou Frederico, eu trabalho numa organização que trabalha com povos e comunidades tradicionais no Brasil há mais de 25 anos.
This is Frederick, who's been working for more than 25 years with people in communities. Que tipo de comunidade? What type of community?
Indígena e quilombola e beiradeiro.
So he's working with indigenous and quilombola communities in the São Paulo area for more than 25 years.
Actually, it's his institution that has been working for more than 25 years. Fred was very young 25 years ago.
Perfect. Good translation.
Yeah, but we can you know, one start.
Continua.
Yeah.
Eu trabalho com as comunidades quilombolas aqui no IS há 10 anos.
Okay, he's been working for 10 years with the communities. Continua.
Eu acho que das questões que vocês colocam, acho que várias delas são bem importantes aqui na região.
These are really important questions you're asking in this region. Pode continuar.
A gente diz que a base do nosso trabalho aqui é um trabalho de autoestima.
At the base of their work, they say it's about self-esteem.
A paisagem.
Mais uma vez?
Têm o conhecimento, eles manejam a paisagem, mas o racismo é tão forte que eles não acreditam neles mesmos.
They have such knowledge about their landscape and their region, but because there's so much racism, they don't believe in themselves, which is why it's a question of self-esteem first and foremost.
Então, os trabalhos que a gente tem desenvolvido ao longo desses 20 anos que a gente está aqui como organização, a gente tenta visibilizar eles, pôr eles no mapa, mostrar os conhecimentos deles, de forma compactuada com eles.
So the focus of this work for the last 25 years has been to make visible their work, to make them seen by others.
E a questão, e aí a gente chega num momento que acho que em que estratégias de turismo e estratégias de comercialização dos produtos agrícolas deles são estratégias que viabilizam as formas de vida deles.
So they've arrived at a point where the tourism, the economics of tourism and the economics of the local food production are part of their strategy to help them.
Porque a gente está, assim, pensando em como essas estratégias também valorizam as formas como eles vivem, como é que a gente dialoga e ajuda eles a dar passos que sejam importantes para a manutenção da cultura deles.
So they're looking at ways to valorize or give value to this way of life. Mais uma vez, a segunda parte?
Não, é isso assim.
That was it? Okay, so to bring value to almost to monetize, but more to give value to what they are doing.
É que a questão é como é que a gente garante que eles tenham autonomia para fazer as escolhas de como eles querem continuar vivendo e transmitindo a cultura deles.
So how to guarantee that they have the autonomy to make their decisions, to make their own decisions, and to transmit their knowledge from one to the other? How to guarantee this?
E então essas estratégias de geração de renda têm que estar de acordo com essas necessidades deles, tem que respeitar o tempo deles. E isso nem sempre a gente consegue acertar a mão e a gente às vezes é atropelado pelo Estado.
So the strategies to generate revenue and generate income have to be aligned with those principles, and they haven't quite arrived, but that's what they're focusing on.
E eu acho que aí...
and sometimes they are run off by the state. That's the very end.
Ah, run off by? Quer dizer, não consegue por causa do Estado?
Yeah,
Não, são
they are.
atropelados.
Aha, okay. And sometimes it is the state itself that prevents it from happening.
Eu acho que... E aí, quando a gente começa a pensar como essas... Quando a gente começa a mostrar que o que eles fazem, a forma como eles manejam a paisagem, ela é uma forma de preservar o mundo para as próximas gerações. Então, o nosso trabalho é mostrar isso.
When they succeed in showing how they manage the landscape, how they manage the land, it's a way of demonstrating that they are protecting for the next generation.
E um pouco do que a gente tenta fazer é isso, são estratégias. Então, assim, alguns caminhos que a gente visualiza para esse futuro, nesse momento, são, além das estratégias de turismo e de comercialização dos produtos deles.
Momento. So these are some of the strategies that they're using to make this possible beyond beyond the tourism? Além do turismo? Foi isso? So beyond tourism, here are some of the ways that they're looking to commercialize. Pode continuar.
A gente está buscando formas de financiar estratégias deles mesmos produzirem o conhecimento deles.
They're looking at ways to monetize. O meu cérebro não é tão grande. They're looking at ways to monetize the production and knowledge of this group. Pode continuar?
De financiar os jovens que estão estudando para que eles consigam retornar para as comunidades.
To finance the young people so that they return and work within these communities.
O Toninho, por exemplo, ele tem uma filha bióloga.
So Toninho, who you met in the video, he has a biological daughter who está trabalhando na faculdade, você disse?
Actually,
não, ela está terminando a faculdade.
He has a daughter who's finishing university.
Yeah, she's a biologist.
Ela é bióloga, desculpa.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for the backup in the translation. He has a daughter who is a biologist completing university.
E a gente está pensando como é que a gente aproveita o que ela aprendeu na universidade para ela mesma mostrar o que eles fazem para o mundo.
So they're looking at how to take advantage of the fact or how to benefit from the fact that she has this experience to show to the world this knowledge, this experience.
Então, quando a Carrie pergunta como a gente pode ajudar, como é que a gente pode pensar estratégias de financiar pequenos projetos que estejam alinhados com essas estratégias.
So when Carrie was asking how to help, it would be to finance small projects like this that lead to these benefits. And by the way, Carrie has dropped off, but make sure you get her email. She will want to talk to you. Continua?
Então, acho que isso para a gente ir pensando, assim, para provocar um pouquinho. Obrigado.
Okay. Yeah, he feels this is enough to get people thinking, to provoke a little, and he thanks us. Thank you, Fred. I'm really glad you spoke up, and thank you for your tolerance of my translation. Reflections, questions, and I'm sorry we lost Arlene. I know she had a question, but we'll hopefully come back. Other responses to what Fred has said, or Fad, you want to straighten out the translation?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have raised a hand, but I never know where is the button. But anyway, one thing I would like to add to what Federico told is that very clearly the work in there connected to these communities, it is about showing what they are already doing. So one thing I noticed about the work of ISA in there, this great institution that works in several areas of the country, and fulfilling resistance to those who are really in need of resistance right now, like the Yanomami in the Amazon and so on. One thing I noticed is that not only Fred but Isa, the institution was helping us to resell, not because they had any interest out of that. I mean, it was a totally different relationship. Normally, everyone working with commerce, you know, they get their fee or something like that. It was not. I mean, their objective was totally different, because reselling things is very political. When you start to resell food, you open way to very different areas, and you have a different political power and recognition. So it is part of a much bigger work that they are doing for 25 years, which is connected to making themselves recognized by what they are doing. And for sure, opening way for them to come back, opening way for them to access the stage. But as Fred said very precisely, you know, it's so much invisible racism going on in the institutions that makes all the things very hard, and especially for them to say that their work is awesome is already hard, because they have to understand that it is really amazing somehow. And I mean, I'm not being very precise in this explanation, but I'm just trying to say that what we are discussing here is provoked by the fact that they started selling there in São Paulo, and this is a strategy of awareness somehow. It's not only an economic strategy. The more the people know about this production, the more they will know that there is these people in this area of São Paulo. I myself am from the state of São Paulo. I knew my state as soon to be a desert, because if you drive to the northeast of the state, you notice that it's only plantations from sugarcane, bull and cows production, and nowadays some soy. When I went to this area, it's a brand new world to me, actually, because it was green. It was, first of all, it was green because we have killed most of the things. It was a traditional population, remaining traditional population. I'm sorry, my camera just turned off right now. But what I'm trying to say is commerce plays a very important economic role for financing these people. But actually, we are talking about something much broader and much bigger than that when we are talking about this population. It's just that.
Thanks, Fabricio, and hopefully your camera will kick back on. There's also, I think, a very aggressive cicada or some kind of bug in the background in your sound. And I know a few people have had to go, which is totally okay. We'll stay open for another 15 minutes or so here. Just wanted to invite any further reflections. Mauricio, I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you're able to hear us and how much you've been able to check in. I think you're normally in Peru, so I'm very curious if you can hear, if you want to unmute, share any reflections. Boniface, Christopher, David, I don't know you. Oh, well, David, I know you a little bit. Some of you I don't know, so I'm just putting you on the spot to see if you want to come off. And Olga and I have been chatting on the background. I know she has to jump off and she's here to listen. But anybody else want to jump in, unmute, unhide yourselves? Boniface, I see you've unmuted. Did you want to say a few words, questions, reflections? You might, I know you were logging in and logging out, so you might have had trouble with the connection. Feel free to put things in the chat. I'm assuming you can hear. Okay, we'll just throw the wires wide open. I'll be quiet and see who speaks next.
Hey, this is Christopher. Sorry, I'm off video because I'm driving and just have been listening intently. I would have the question that I would have for Fabrizio, and I guess to the topic or the title of the Zoom is specifically, can you relay some of the key points that have been learned in the decolonizing process? What to have takeaways as we are individually and collectively engaged in regenerative projects across the globe, some with indigenous peoples, some without, but certainly there is globally a need to decolonize. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts in terms of what has been learned in that process of decolonizing regen ag. Thanks, and I'm going to go back on mute.
Thanks, Christopher. And Fabricio, I'm going to encourage you to give some sound bites, like what your key takeaways would be. And then I'm actually going to invite around the room, because I bet there are a bunch. So rather than this being like big discussion, let's see if we can come up with some good breadcrumbs. I have a few in my back pocket too. So what are some of the key learnings or takeaways that we're seeing as possibilities to really decolonize regen ag? And I love your nod to intersectionality there, David. The term is so intersectional, we can apply it in lots of places. So Fabricio, do you want to kick us off with a few sort of soundbite takeaways that might help? And then I'll invite everyone on the line to give a few closing thoughts if they will.
Okay, I'd like a better understanding of what do you call takeaways. Can you tell me, Lorraine, what takeaways is?
Well, I think where Christopher's going, and Christopher, unmute and steer me straight if this doesn't seem right, but what I've understood is, what would you like people to remember or sort of hold from after this conversation to consider as we go forward decolonizing regenerative agriculture as a little to-do this Friday?
Yeah, well, I really think that we should visit the structures, the facilities, the things that interest us the most. When we are moving the regenerative agenda, it's very easy to simplify reality into the agenda, which is complex as the most interesting experiences, they are complex. So the more you get closer to these experiences, the more you can translate that to other people. So I really am encouraging people to get closer. And that is also an answer to Norton. I don't remember the first name. It was something Norton.
Carrie Norton.
Carrie Norton. Because she asked about how to open resources for them to grow. Well, one thing I noticed is that what I was doing, reselling this food, could be something that is part of something bigger, just as the experience that I was talking about from Isa. So, I mean, what we are doing in everyday lives can be somehow a greater strategy for, bringing the agenda forth, the regenerative agenda. But well, I would like to mention several other examples close to the experience of Copernic Valley. There is a great group connected to SOF, which is a feminist organization that connects to Black Quilombola producers, Black Quilombola women producers. It's another very, very nice example. Here in the coast of Rio, very close to São Paulo, there is one producer that is right in the middle of a national park. There was a great bunch of conflicts because of that, but he's one of the most amazing experiences I have seen. Not all of these things are replicable, but we definitely learn when we get closer to these people, and especially when we listen in their time, not in our time. So that's the thing that I would say that are takeaways from what I've seen so far.
Thank you. Especially, I love the listening in their time. It's a challenge, I think, in our culture. Other takeaways, suggestions, breadcrumbs you want us to hold as we go forward? I'll offer one that jumped out when I was listening to Adan Toninho, the way they learned from the soil. So Toninho mentioned a plant that grew that they hadn't seen in 50 years and that only their elders recognized, and they listened to that. They let that information come to them. I think that's both literally the soil and the seeds, and it's also an openness to hearing from generations that we may have a gap to be able to listen, but the remnants are still around us. That to me felt like a really important takeaway and something that we need to construct into our lives and stay open to. Heather, Natalie, Boniface, Fred, Christopher, David, unmute. Any last minute things you're carrying with you as you go forward?
I can say one of the things that comes to me was when Toninho was talking about the 95 families within that community, those collections of communities, all respecting each other's ways of living and working, and just that sense of interrelating. So small approaches, all aware of each other, and so there's a larger whole, but it's really dependent on all the smaller co-learning that's happening and relating in between them. So that really struck me and feels like a principle to think about and take forward. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Who else? Que mais?
Can I speak?
Please.
That's really awesome to hear, like all the, it's just giving me so much food to chew on now. So inspirational, because there's a lot of charities here and stuff doing work during the pandemic, but it all seems to be like people with their hand out and that sort of thing. So is it okay if I share like these links and videos in some of the groups in Bali? Because I think it would be really interesting for people to see, like, how a different approach can really occur where there isn't, just white people hanging around wanting to be charitarians and all this stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Any links you'd like to put in the chat will be saved, and we're recording this. And I'm making a note here, saying it out loud, that I will lift the links from the chat as the relevant ones to put in the YouTube description as well. So that'll be captured. So if you're listening to this afterwards, some of the links that we're mentioning here, please look in the description of the YouTube, since you won't be able to see the chat. Thanks so much, Natalie. Really glad you were able to join us from Bali. Great to have your perspective.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Really great to have you here. Christiana, you've just joined. We're in our closing remarks. So welcome all, and thanks for joining. We're just about to wrap up. We haven't met, I don't think, Christiana, but if you had a question you wanted to put out to the ether, this is being recorded and it's going to be shared on YouTube. Was there something about decolonizing regenerative agriculture that caught your attention and made you want to join this conversation that you want to leave in the last few minutes that we're here?
No, I'm coming back from a great injury. And
oh dear.
Yes, and I'm really slow. So I had all my hours mixed up. I apologize. I am going to watch it and I'm going to come back stronger the next time around. I just wanted to say here, I am starting to get back into the swing of things. Thank you. Yes, wow. Yes, David. Hi, David. I'm coming back soon.
We see you and hope you heal well, and delighted that you could join us even for this moment. And this will be shared as a YouTube, so you'll be able to catch up on the conversation. There's a lot of links and people, I'm sure, who would love to hear from you and who might have ideas or questions to provoke and spark further progress. So thanks so much for joining. I'll bring us to a close unless somebody puts their hand up and says they want to give a sort of final comment or word. And I'm watching for that as I'm saying my final thoughts here. Really want to thank Fabricio for bringing Adan Toninho into the virtual room with us. It has been one of the highlights of my life to get to know those two and learn from what they're doing really shaped the arc of my understanding of what it means to grow and produce and distribute food, and so much more. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification. Really appreciate all the facilitation you did both on screen, but I know how much went on in the background. David, you're a quiet fellow on this call, but your support for this whole set of conversations has been absolutely essential. You've made it possible, and I'm very grateful. To all the other voices who've been on this call and who are still here now, thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate your insights, your questions, and hopefully this is part of a much longer conversation that continues in ways we may not even know. It's one of the neat things about soil and seeds is so much of the amazing work is hidden, but it's the most important stuff. So I'll be quiet here. If anybody wants to unmute and say any words of thanks, I'll give Fabricio, I'll give you the last word, and otherwise I'll just be quiet and very grateful for all of you. Hope you have great weekends. Stay safe and healthy and happy, and let's keep looking after one another.
Well, so if anyone can stop me anytime too, if there is any last words. I will just forward the thanks to Fred, because if it wasn't for the time I was hosted in his house and the way his institution showed an open way for this conversation with the communities, it wouldn't be possible anything that is happening here right now. So thank you so much, and keep doing the work. It's very important. And apart from that, I would love to have Adan and Toninho here talking for themselves, because as you have seen, they are amazing people. We had the strategy to have this conversation in English so that we can open way for new listening people and attentive people. And for those who have any possibilities to open way for them to fund some of their projects in there. There are several. Fred is in here. He knows best all of these projects. All of them are amazing because what they are doing is amazing. Truthfully, I've been there. Can tell it by experience. And if you can listen to what they are saying in the time they are, I'm pretty sure it's quite a philosophical conversation that took place. So I'm very proud of being a testimony of what happened, and it's in there in the link for any time you want to listen to that or listen again. That's it. Thank you, Lorraine, a lot for the invitation. It was amazing to do all of this up until now, and for sure we will definitely keep the decolonial talks going on with other people. We have so much people to listen in this world. I mean, and listen in a much greater way than we have been doing so far. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care. Bye.